It's my first time to be at this conference, so I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to speak this afternoon. Just checking the time. This is what I'm going to talk about in the next 10 minutes or so. I can only just really touch on this. There's so much that we could talk about. One of the beauties of the UK situation is that we've got some really good surveys which release data very quickly. So we have a pretty contemporaneous picture of e-cigarette use and the impact on smoking in the UK. And this is from one survey. It's from the Action on Smoking and Health surveys. And I'd like to acknowledge Deborah Arnott and others who work hard to get these out in the field to give us an up-to-date picture. So you can see from this that we've got about 2.8 million current users, and I think, building on Linda's talk, that's people who've tried and say they're still using e-cigarettes in Great Britain. So that's out of about 65 million. About 1 in 5 smokers are current e-cigarette users, so that's the pale blue line. And then you can see it's plateaued a little bit more recently. The red line are ex-smokers, so you can see it's been rising steadily, e-cigarette use rising steadily among ex-smokers, And then the bottom line, the purplish line, is never smokers. And so that's encouraging to see that we're still seeing very few regular current users of e-cigarettes among people who have never smoked. What we are seeing is a decline in the proportion of current e-cigarette users who say they smoke, so so-called dual users, and as I've said, an increase in the proportion of ex-smokers. So we're seeing about approximately equal proportions now of smokers and ex-smokers who are using e-cigarettes. This issue of dual use is one that exercises many in our field, and I would just like to say that I think dual use is pretty much inevitable in the early stages. E-cigarettes aren't magic bullets, and we know that many e-cigarette users do go through a period of experimentation. I mean, obviously, I would like them all to stop smoking as soon as possible. But the next slide I'm going to show you is from another of our very useful surveys, which is the Smokers Toolkit survey, which many of you will have heard of by Robert West and Jamie Brown in London. And what this shows is that the proportion of e-cigarette users who also smoke is very similar to the proportion of nicotine replacement therapy users who also smoke. So it's not that people using e-cigarettes are doing so in a very different way. So I don't think we need to get too exercised about dual use, except to encourage people to stop smoking as soon as possible. What's been happening to smoking prevalence then while e-cigarettes have been going up? So you can see where the blue arrow is here. These are governmental surveys, and you can see smoking prevalence declined up until 2013, so that decline continued. And then using Robert West's survey, you can see that smoking prevalence has continued to decline in more recent years. You can see that's plateauing out a bit, so that's something that we need to watch. And what we have to bear in mind is that smoking prevalence is, of course, influenced by a lot of things going on, and one of the concerns in England at the moment is that our mass media marketing campaigns have been heavily reduced. I'm going to skip that slide because I know we're short of time. But this is encouraging. This is again from the Toolkit study, and it shows those who stopped smoking in the past 12 months. So smokers, people who smoked in the last year, who've stopped smoking in the last 12 months, you can see has been rising since e-cigarettes came on the market. So in general, they're a fairly positive picture about the impact on adult smoking. And what you can see in this slide is the beginnings of a separation of the nicotine market. So you see this in Sweden because of the use of snus, and we're now beginning to see in England a separation of the nicotine market because of the use of e-cigarettes. So moving to youth, because as we all heard, this is something, again, that's exercising our community. So this is some work that Linda and I and others did last year and published, again, based on a number of different surveys in the UK. And it's a busy slide, so don't need to focus on it in too much detail, and I don't think I can get this to work. But the left-hand group of bars shows that there is experimentation among youth in Great Britain. about just over 10% in this slide. But the more than weekly, so that's the middle set of bars, I can't do that, is around 1%. But when you move to never smokers, so that's the right-hand side two sets of bars, you can see there's much less experimentation, and regular e-cigarette use among never smokers is negligible, very few people. So that's a good message that we're not seeing e-cigarette regular use among never smoking youth. And what's been happening to smoking prevalence among young people, you can see then also continuing to decline. So no evidence of the so-called gateway effect in young people in England. So, of course, I have to mention Mike Russell's name given this conference. And what I want to just spend a couple of minutes now on is why I think the situation in the UK is a bit different from other countries. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the influence of Mike Russell. Many of us have come out of Mike Russell's camp, Martin Jarvis, Peter Hyatt, Colin Fairbairn, Robert West, etc. And so I think we do have this understanding of nicotine and the differences from cigarette smoke in England. I'm going to make no apology for the fact that we do implement a comprehensive tobacco control strategy in England, and that we're at the top of the leaderboard, if you like, in Europe for doing so. But our tobacco control strategy incorporates harm reduction as well as cessation and prevention efforts. And why have we done that? I think that's because we've had a fairly concerted effort amongst those people involved in tobacco control in our field. And again, I'd like to acknowledge Deborah Arnott from ASH, Martin Dockrell from Public Health England, and many others who've worked together to try to get a consensus around the need for harm reduction as part of a comprehensive tobacco control strategy. And you can just see some there of the reports that have been coming out over the last decade, which has helped to form that consensus. The 2007 Royal College of Physicians report was too early because e-cigarettes hadn't then come on the market, which is why we produced the 2016 report just earlier this year to incorporate electronic cigarettes into that. Now, of course, that's not to say that we're responsible for harm reduction in electronic cigarettes. Electronic cigarettes came out of the field, very popular and rising amongst vapers, but it's to say that what we've tried to do in the UK is develop a consensus about their importance, their role in an overall comprehensive tobacco control strategy. Of course, I have to just say a couple of words about the report that I was involved in from Public Health England last year, and I think we made some very sensible recommendations about smokers needing to stop and to try e-cigarettes to help them to stop if they couldn't, and that vapers should stop smoking. But of course, most of the publicity was around the 95% less harmful figure. And it caused a lot of consternation, particularly in our top flight medical journals. So these are examples from the Lancet. And the British Medical Journal really went to town on it with its infographics and cartoons and God knows what else. But actually they did us an enormous favour, because what emerged out of that was a new consensus, and this time involving organisations which had hitherto been quite against harm reduction as part of our strategy. So in many ways that was a good thing that came out of that. Of course, it also got David Cameron and David Cameron's support, and was mentioned in the House of Commons. I know we haven't got much time, but my main concern, I have quite a lot of concerns, but my main concern is around public misunderstandings, and that's of the relative harms of electronic cigarettes and tobacco cigarettes. But I think underpinning that are misunderstandings about the role of nicotine in harm. And the relationship between nicotine and smoked tobacco. And this slide is from our international tobacco control survey, where we asked the same questions in lots of different countries. And this one was, does nicotine in cigarettes, nicotine in cigarettes does not cause cancer. And as you can see, only 50% of those smokers agree with that statement. So I think that is a failure on all of our part to communicate that correctly. I thought there was an increasing trend in the green line, which is UK, but it seems to have come down in recent years, sadly. we're seeing the same pattern on relative harms of cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So this one we published last year, which showed that increasingly people were thinking the harms, they were equal harms between e-cigarettes and cigarettes, and the same pattern among youth. And this is a slide that Linda showed, where the less harmful is differentiated, and you can see only 15% believing that e-cigarettes are a lot less harmful, which is the correct answer. But I just want to finish with this slide, which shows how, this was published today actually in Tobacco Control, which shows how harm perceptions can influence not only how people use them and whether people use them, but also their support for policies around e-cigarettes. So you can see here that where people were believing e-cigarettes to be less harmful, they're more likely to support wider accessibility of e-cigarettes. So those are my conclusions. E-cigarettes are increasing, regular usage still largely confined to smokers and ex-smokers, so there's no evidence of renormalization or gateway effects. We recognise harm reduction is an important component of an overall tobacco control strategy in the UK, and therefore if we are responsible for exporting smoking to many other countries, I hope we can help to export some sense in the sense of ensuring harm reduction is part of tobacco control. And risk perceptions are generally poor. And I'm told I've got 9 seconds to, by popular demand, I was asked to show, sorry, that's a thank you slide for all of the people I work with. I was asked to show this clip from something which is quintessentially British, James Bond. It's just a bit of fun, but it's in line with the conference theme.
May I smoke?
Yes, give him his cigarette. It won't be the nicotine that kills you, Mr. Bond.
Ah. Thank you very much.